Hey everyone,
Hello.
welcome to the Rundown
Glad you're here.
podcast of New Life Assembly of God Church in Monticello, Arkansas. My name is Tim Park. This is Bethany Hoover.
Hello.
We are your co-hosts for this conversation. And so I asked this. I think I've asked you this last couple times. What episode is this?
This is 40.
This is our 40th
We've hit
episode.
40. Yeah.
Well, that seems appropriate then.
Yeah.
Our 40th episode. Thank you for being a
Crazy.
part of it. As
Yeah.
always, if you appreciate this content, if you like it in any way, if you would share it, if you would if you would do all the things
Give
on
us
all the
some
platforms.
feedback. Yeah.
Love some feedback. And we want to approach might be a sensitive topic
Maybe.
for some people. And so it's a really popular or maybe trending topic
Kinda.
in the church world right now, and it's the topic of church hurt. And I want to begin our conversation. And again, we don't want to. We're not going to name drop or name bash or anything like
Sorry
that.
about that.
But we want to. It is an interesting topic. I think it's important. There's a lot of validity. There's a lot of truth that that is
For sure.
connected to that. But I also think a lot of it may be as we dive through, and we may spend just today, or maybe we might spend a couple weeks
Yeah.
talking about it, depending on how it goes. But there may also be some misinformation or what might be church hurt may not actually be church hurt.
Right. Right.
And I want to talk about that
Yeah.
too.
We can put some handles on it and define it, and then maybe hopefully kind of guide some people through that. And it's like, how do we navigate church hurt in a healthy way and all of this?
I think if you have been part of the church, and we're using the church in kind of a collective term,
right.
the global
The
church,
church.
and that can include our church, it can include your church.
I don't think any church is immune to it.
I don't think any church
honestly.
is. I think regardless of size and denomination and region, I think if you're rural, if you're urban, if you're suburban, large church, small church, I think we're all, the church is made up of people,
So we're
and
gonna have it.
so everyone's going to experience it. So let me open it up with this question, and let me hear your take on it, and maybe I'll share some of my thoughts. What is church hurt? How would you define it in your words, your own words?
We kind of talked a little bit before we started, but I think really church hurt is just a broad term for people hurt within a church. I think, unfortunately, the church gets the label as a whole because as we talk about this, I guess we can dive into why, because I don't really know why that happens, because like we had talked about previously, like that label doesn't get put anywhere else. But really, it's just when people get hurt by other people within a church setting, and
Yeah.
it causes offense, bitterness, resentment, all of those things.
I agree with that. I think it's church hurt is people hurt, but it happened within the context
Of church.
of a place where it shouldn't have happened, or our expectations was
Right.
that somehow in this environment people should act different than people.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is some truth to that. There is some unmet expectations
Yeah, for sure.
with dealing with people in the church. You're not expecting behavior A or behavior B, and you encounter that.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, even though that experience was isolated. Now we've attached this is the whole church. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's
It's like
like
I'm faulting the whole
I
church
had
because of
one
this.
bad hamburger at McDonald's whenever, and
No, I don't go back.
now I'm not going to any McDonald's anywhere because it was one McDonald's in St. Louis
Yeah.
in 2006. And now I'm just never going to do that because it represents all the
whole thing.
McDonald's.
Right.
Okay. And again, I'm not
Great examples.
saying I'm not saying right or wrong. We're putting some definition
Yeah.
to what is church hurt.
Yeah.
You were hurt by somebody, something, in the context of the church, and now that's the label we've put on that. Why is it so? Maybe it's two questions. Like, why is it sensitive? It's a sensitive topic, and why are we just now hearing about it in in the way that we're hearing about it? It seems to be the topic on a lot, like, not just our podcast.
There's a lot of
Obviously,
podcasts.
obviously we've been influenced by other podcasts that are
Yes.
talking about
Just
it,
a little bit.
and other people.
There are books about it.
Yeah.
It's very prevalent that are like,
So church hurt has a
Reason.
platform now.
yeah, it does.
So why do you think?
I think people are getting very open and brave on the internet these days, just
Yeah.
in general.
Sure.
And so podcasters are becoming more forthright with different topics and everything. And so they're just talking about things that no one's wanted to talk about. But I think that also comes back to like my generation. Millennials are a large percentage of millennials, not all of them, but a large percentage of millennials grew up in church and are now adults who have their own take on church and
Yeah.
maybe still been in church or may have left the church, who knows. And for some reason there seems to be like a mass movement. Really, I personally think it's led by millennials. That's just my personal observation. That they're kind of leading the charge on, like, hey, this is what I experienced in church growing up and all of those things.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm no longer, or this is why I am and got healed past it.
Right.
But that goes two ways. And so, but I think, like, your generation, for example, never, as a whole, is less likely to talk about uncomfortable things.
True.
I've noticed. And the generation before, because that's just how boomers raised Gen Xers.
Yeah.
You don't talk about hard stuff. We mind our own business. We don't talk about our issues, especially in a public forum.
I think my generation, especially, I think that's exactly true. Or it's we just accept behavior for
Yeah,
what it is.
That's true. Or like, we don't need to talk
and
about
rather than challenge it,
Yeah.
and rather to expose it, challenge it, and change it, we've just accepted
We're
part
like,
of that.
It is what it is.
And I don't agree with that
Yeah.
at all. I think wrong, sinful, negative behavior needs to be addressed, and so I do appreciate that about it. Now, let me give a disclaimer from me personally. As a pastor, I've given my life to the church,
Yeah.
and so my natural inclination is to always be on the defense.
Right. Support of the church.
So what I'm doing though is I want to approach this topic with just an open mind and open heart, and I'm not discounting or dismissing it. I'm not saying there is not church hurt. That's not
Right.
true.
Yeah, that's
Obviously
not what
there
we're saying.
is. Okay.
Yes.
But so I don't want to diminish or discount anyone's experience, because, well, you're just a pastor, you have to say that,
Yeah,
or
no.
whatever.
That's why I think it's good. That's why I like being able to have this space on a podcast so that we can talk about these issues in like a let's see all sides kind of thing. Because because people, we're both on staff at a church, and people probably may assume how we feel about things. You never
Sure.
know. And so this gives kind of a space to Like, just throw it all out there, you know?
I um I appreciate the forum to be able to talk about that. I think um that offense, because I think if we break church hurt down, okay, because that's a broad term,
Mm-hmm.
so we need to look at the root cause. The root cause is going to be a person, a situation,
Yeah.
um, and then from there an event, okay,
Yeah.
whatever that is, and from that event has led to an offense,
Yeah.
okay, whether it be minor or major, whatever. But that's, I think that's the lens you need to look at this through.
Yeah.
So the reality is there is a 100% chance of being offended in a church.
Yes. Yes.
And I've said this so many times because I see it over and over again, and I have seen it over and over again for many, many years. There is if you choose to be a part of the most amazing, life-giving organization and organism on planet Earth, being the
Yeah.
Church of Jesus Christ, and you want to be part of that, the odds are absolutely in favor of being hurt.
For sure.
Why is that? Because we are people.
We are people.
Now, here's what you could do. You could engage the church at a very superficial, high level. Okay. Weekly, bi-weekly, twice a year for some
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
Now, if you do that, and you engage the church just from a observational, entertainment, or consumer capacity, then you're probably not going to be offended. Or if you're
Right.
offended,
Yeah.
you're offended from in a two-dimensional way. You know, the
Right.
way
Very, like, superficial.
right, the way you might be offended at what is said on a television show or a
Like,
podcast.
I didn't really like that
I didn't
kind of
really
thing.
like that, but it's
Yeah.
not going to affect your life one way or the
Right.
other, really.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's not how the church is supposed to be engaged. That's not the
No.
life of the church.
No.
That's not where transformation happens. That's not where relationship happens. That's not where growth and discipleship takes place. So you got to go deeper with that. So if you're going to go deeper in the church, you're not doing it on an institutional basis. You're doing it with people,
Yes.
one-on-one
Yeah.
relationships.
It's community with people. It's like one big imperfect family. Like, you love your family all the time, but you may not always like the things that your family
Absolutely.
members do, and
Absolutely.
someone's gonna get mad at somebody, and someone's gonna have an argument or a disagreement, but at the end of the day, you're still family with the same bloodline, all connected. So it's literally the same, 100% the same.
Yeah.
And so, how do you address things within your family, and why do you not address them in a similar way with people who wrong you in the church?
Yeah. I think that's where our disconnect is,
I think so.
because and if we grab a hold of that and we truly grab it, then that's how we'll view church. But for a lot of people, because they're looking at it from a consumer or entertainment
Yeah.
or a two-dimensional view, it's easy to walk away from, and it's easy to blame,
Right.
right?
It's easy to blame the whole thing.
Yeah. So it's like, well, if you were hurt by your dad, I don't blame my entire bloodline.
Right.
I don't blame, my fourth great grandfather
Yeah.
because of what my dad did.
Right.
My dad just, whatever. He didn't. I'll just use that as an example.
Yeah.
But the church is meant to be family because it is a family. And,
Yeah.
we're connected by the deepest connection that even transcends
Yeah.
blood family,
yeah.
actual
That's
family,
just, yeah, there's
biological
scripture. There's
family.
scripture for that.
Yeah. So it's meant to be lived at the closest, most intimate
Yeah.
level, which is how and why it is so damaging. Because these were people that I thought were my brothers and sisters,
Right.
and they've hurt me in this way. And I think that's why it's so personal
Yeah.
and hurts at a deeper level than even other
Yeah.
relationships that we have in life.
Right. Because it's like we said before, like we talked before we started this, like you're not gonna say you had work hurt or like
Mall hurt,
yeah, wherever you go, and
restaurant hurt.
because it's the expectation. I
Yes.
think because at those places, you know that you're probably gonna get frustrated with somebody in those spaces.
I have
and this, I don't know why it's
I
different.
think a lot of these environments we're in, we have low expectations, and you probably should have low expectations.
But then the church has unrealistically high expectations.
It's the opposite
Like,
end.
way over
It's
here.
the opposite end,
Right.
where we, and I think a lot of that expectation is not misplaced.
I don't think so.
I don't think it is.
No.
I think we should expect certain behaviors and things like
Well, yeah,
that. But
because
at
there's
this,
a standard.
absolutely. But we keep walking back to the imperfection of humanity.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that pastor shouldn't have acted like that. Well, maybe he shouldn't have acted like that. But you what did you expect of him in that?
Yeah. And
in
now,
that
how are you?
situation?
I think like everything we talked about for the last 10 weeks, talking about decisions.
Yeah.
And I think church hurt is all about decisions. Okay, someone wronged you. Now, what do you do about it? How are you going to respond? And we 100%, that's the beauty of free will, is we get the choice to respond in
Absolutely.
the correct way.
Absolutely. And we'll get to that. I think that
Yeah.
response to that is part of the healing of
Yeah,
that.
that's
but
more like action.
but let me hear
steps.
from you. How much do you want to share? Can you share just for a couple minutes, maybe a time where you had church hurt?
Mm-hmm.
You were hurt by a leader or hurt by maybe the collective group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk through a time like
Yeah.
that you want to?
Um,
And please name names,
Write it
locations.
down.
Just kidding. Don't do that unless you want to.
No. I'd say I have more experience with like collective. So, growing up, I sat under quite a few pastors. And right or wrong, regardless of whatever happened and why, that's tough as someone going through your formative years of
Sure.
trying to form what does church look like. And I've seen just hurtful decisions made that affected the church as a whole. And the more times, every time a pastor would leave, it's like something would fracture again. And it's like there would be more damage that happened.
Yeah.
And I think out of necessity, the board were the ones that took care of the church. For right or wrong. And to give people credit, everyone makes the decisions that they believe are right in the moment.
We hope so.
We hope so, yeah. And everyone is doing what they think is the most correct decision in the moment.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I can't fault people for that. And so,
What decisions was made to hurt you? So you're saying the decision was to remove a pastor or to create an environment where he wanted to leave? Or,
yeah, kind
okay,
of, yeah,
okay.
situations like that. And there were a couple moments where you could tell that, like, who was making the decisions, And so, and it wasn't the pastor. And so decisions were being enforced, and you could just, the whole thing was just not great on a lot of fronts. But growing up is seeing all sides of it. And so as a child growing up, I didn't realize how much it affected me. So I didn't think any of it was church hurt. didn't think any of it. Like when I got to college, I thought, hey, I've got a fantastic church family. I'm rooted in it, you know, and all of these things. But then as I started to go deeper, I realized all of these fractured moments that had happened because there was no consistency for me.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't one just like pivotal moment where the church hurt me and that was it and I'm done.
You
It
grew,
was just a
you
collective.
grew up in a dysfunctional environment.
Yes.
That doesn't mean it wasn't a loving church. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that wasn't
I
amazing
loved it.
aspects of it.
Yeah.
But the dysfunction created these issues that you probably, and a lot of people probably didn't even know were harmful
Right.
until later on.
Internal, it felt
What happened?
like that.
What
Yeah.
you know? There's a term like it's a military term called collateral damage.
Yes.
And
yes.
so when one opposing sides, fires artillery or a missile or a bomb onto their enemy, it has a target. And it
Yeah.
may hit right in the middle of the target, destroy the target, but it's got shrapnel and debris and damage and fire and all this such that affects the areas all around it.
Right.
And that's where innocent people
Yeah.
are harmed, and that's usually that is what is unique about when something bad happens in a church. The decision had some intention to it. It was for a specific person or a specific
Yeah,
thing, but it affects the whole body.
Exactly.
And lots of times that's not given the correct amount of analysis to it before it's done. How is this going to affect
Right.
everyone?
It's like, yeah, we're doing what we think is best, but
Who is it?
who is this affecting? That's
Who is this best for?
Right.
And again, maybe that analysis did happen, and the cost was counted, and it was the necessary
risk.
right, and
Yeah.
but the hurt was the same.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Because like the hurt of at like 15, 16 years old, the hurt of losing a pastor is so tough, and you don't really, and I don't think. I mean, yes, again, it could have been taken into account, but you don't really process any of that, And then you're later in life, you're like, whoa, okay, yeah, there's some issues there,
I was 34 years old, 33, 34 years old, serving in my home church, and we had the pastor. There was a pastoral transition. Pastor I got saved under resigned, left the church. He'd been there a really long time. 6 months later, we got a new pastor. This is the only church I've ever really been involved in, grew up in. This is the church I got saved in and filled with the baptism of the Holy Spirit, called to ministry, serving, and went through that transitional piece, really hurt, just because this man I absolutely loved and adored was no longer my pastor.
Yeah.
Had never been through that. Chad Stafford is hired. He becomes my new pastor. Immediately connect and become fast friends. And it's in that ministry I learned how to serve a pastor. I learned how to connect with a pastor. I learned just learned a lot of things and through that. And there was division in our church on direction and the vision of the church between our pastor and leadership.
Yeah.
And that came to a head. And I was heavily involved. I was serving as part-time staff on the church, so I got really involved in the drama of that and what took place. And he was ultimately asked to leave. I was prior to that, there had been a special vote called, and so all the membership showed up on a Sunday night or whenever it was, and it was a vote of confidence for Chad. And I had never been involved in any of that in my life, and part of our district leadership came and oversaw the vote and the meeting. And in hindsight, I found out the district leadership had told Chad, "Man, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do it."
Wow.
And he's like, "No, I need to do it because I got to
Yeah.
know where I stand."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was, and a vote of confidence is just that.
Yeah.
So you got all the membership there, and you got, if you have 100 members there, they take a vote. Do you want me to be your pastor, or do you not want me to be your pastor?
How many of you actually want me here? Yeah.
And so you will know a percentage of people that don't want you there. And ultimately, what that says is they don't want you, they don't want your family, and they want you to move. And
I don't know if that's helpful or not.
it was, there was such an unhealthy environment that that led to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chad ultimately, because in that regard, it doesn't help you to know that a majority of the people want you there. When a majority, what does that mean?
Right.
51%, 60%.
Because in your human
70%?
brain, you're gonna think about that's other small percentage.
Yeah.
Like there's this many people
I
that
still
don't
have
want
to
me.
pastor the 30% or whatever that don't want me there.
Yeah.
If I choose to stay.
Yeah.
And so he left, and I left. My family left, and another good friend of ours left that was on staff there. And it was a significant moment in our life, and which God ultimately absolutely redeemed. But it, for over a year, it felt like a death.
Yeah. Like grief.
It felt like a awful divorce took place.
Yeah.
Because not only did I leave, but 200 other people left during that time. It was a really, really ugly time of gossip and backbiting, and just the enemy, that Satan had an absolute heyday.
Yeah.
I think
He loves
Satan.
it.
I think Satan at that moment was waving a banner of victory for what he had done, and he had. It was.
He caused strife and chaos
Oh,
and
all of it.
all the things he loves.
And we dealt with pride, and we dealt with mistrust, and it was just an ugly thing. And I, in hindsight, during that time, I'm blaming this group of leaders for what they did, what I looked at, what they did to my friend, and what they did to my church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the Lord had to take me through a process, and we'll get into this maybe in the next couple of weeks of what healing looks like. But the Lord had to take me through a process. Well, what was my responsibility in that? How did I respond to that?
Yeah.
Could I have played a part in keeping our church together, seeing what the enemy was doing for what he was actually
right.
doing?
Right. Seeing that it was the enemy.
Right. And
Personally.
so when I came to a place of personal healing, and then he brought me to a place of reconciliation.
Yeah.
And so and then the rest is, as they say, amazing history. But I think that was the hardest part of the experience, was the absolute heartbreak
Yeah.
and disappointment of the behavior of 5 guys. Just 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it never evolved to a place of where I was blaming the whole institution.
No. Yeah.
I never blamed even a deacon board, quote unquote, or a leadership team. I never blamed that. And I never blamed God but I had to come to a place where I understood it. This was never God's plan.
Right.
God really, because of where we were, God had nothing to do with it, and that was evident.
Yeah.
And so it didn't negatively affect my relationship with God, other than me. And this is a different part of the story, but me coming to grips with my part in the ultimate division of God's church.
Wow.
And so that affected my relationship with the Lord, because I had to come to a place of confession, of disobedience,
Yeah.
and anyway, that
Yeah.
so was did I experience have I experienced church hurt? Absolutely. One of the ugliest things that can happen in the life of a believer who's part of a life-giving church,
Yeah.
and when that changes, and churches, they call it split,
Yeah.
you know, and it's hard, and I can understand like what you experienced, where when it happened when you were so young, and you're just an innocent bystander.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
part of the collateral damage
Yeah.
of what's
Unfortunately,
taking
like
place.
there's no. I was not able to make decisions, obviously, because you had to be 18 to be a voting member, and so there was no active part that I could play at all. Because I was like, there's nothing I can do about any of this.
Well, you're also just spiritually immature to
Right.
to not understand. You're not understanding
Yeah.
what is taking place
Yeah.
here.
I think kind of. I understood because I've always operated under the gift of discernment, even really from a young age.
Yeah.
I've kind of felt that from the time I was like 14 or 15. And so there were things that I was kind of seeing through and seeing that that some adults probably weren't even seeing.
Yeah.
But I think you said it really well. Although different experiences, but very similar in nature, it's that the one operating all of that was the enemy the
for
entire
sure.
time, because Satan was seeing the human deficiencies, but also he was seeing the desire for a shepherd that we needed for so long and kept trying to find it.
Yeah.
But in those moments when someone didn't work out or this guy didn't work out, Satan was the one kind of sliding in there and fragmenting further and further and causing the damage.
Absolutely.
You know.
I mean, when you look at that, I mean, who really wants the church to be hurt and the church to cause hurt?
Yeah.
Who wants that?
Exactly.
The enemy does.
Yeah.
Obviously, God does not want to do that. And I think people, well-intentioned people, don't want that. But there is a pride, preference, stubbornness.
Yeah. I think that's a big one, especially in the South. You deal with.
Well,
some-
that's you. Anyone that is bought into their church, that they're a member, like a this is part of my identity. I'm bought in.
Yeah.
They have an idea of what it should be, and so I get that.
Yeah.
Many times, this church, man, my great grandfather helped found this church, and my grandma was baptized in this church,
Yeah.
and it becomes, there's personal ownership in that, which is
Right. Yeah, I
fantastic, which
saw
is
that too,
awesome,
yeah.
which is awesome. But I think sometimes that personal ownership can be prideful and
think so.
really deceive us from what God wants in
Right.
His church.
Right.
This is not your church.
Yeah.
It's not my church.
And it's like, okay, what we've been doing is not working. And obviously it's causing damage, and because over the process, like even up until the time that I left, like people were leaving, people would leave and come and go and,
Sure.
and that kind of thing. And so other people were getting hurt in the process. But, It's being willing to say, okay, this is the decision we need to make. Regardless of how we feel about it, this is for the overall health of the church, whether that's close the doors for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's do this and reevaluate, and then let's go from there and see, or whatever that may look like.
Right.
You know, it's take a step back, or like put the pride down, and let's take care of the church.
Yeah. I
And take care of the people.
I want to continue this discussion next week. I want to talk about does church hurt? Is it a result of personal failure, systemic issues,
Yeah.
or both? And we'll jump off next week
Yeah.
talking about that. Appreciate you sharing your heart. You got a question, you have a comment about church hurt. Maybe you've experienced that. You want to share your testimony with us, man? Put that in the comments or private
Sure.
message us or however you want to. We would love to hear your story and see you healed through that.
Yeah.
Um,
'Cause that's kind of the ultimate goal with even talking about this topic is like, it's not to talk about how we've been hurt and all that stuff, but it's really to so that everyone can figure out how to experience healing
I
from
think
whatever church hurt they have.
I think that is absolutely what we want to accomplish. Is everyone has dealt with it. Maybe you're dealing with it. Maybe church hurt has kept you from the body, or even maybe it's even damaged your walk with the Lord. And so we want to see you healed. We want to see you established with Jesus,
Yeah.
and
the church.
and reconnect with His church. And so I pray you have an amazing week. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week on the
Rundown.